This is chapter 7, where we are using procedures and exception handling. I wanted to give a brief overview of what this chapter entails so that you will have a good idea of what you are creating and how to create it and how your procedures are operating. Up until this point, you have been allowing Visual Studios to automatically create your procedures for you. I'm gonna go here to Visual Studios to our actual form that we're gonna create for chapter 7, the guided portion. And if you recall, whenever you would click or double click on a button, it would open up inside of that particular procedure. So that's where what we've created thus far, of worked with thus far, is making our objects event driven. So it automatically generates this procedure heading here. And you'll notice that it has the private sub, and then it's passing parameters, and then it has a name. And then once we have all our code on the inside, it would then have end sub. So this particular portion here, where it ends there and it begins here, all this is related to that particular button, okay? Now, what we want to look at for this particular chapter is the difference in procedures. There are two types of procedures. You have a sub procedure and you have a function procedure. You can also look through your slides. Your slides have everything that I'm going to talk about, but I'm going to kind of walk through it just a little bit to make sure everyone is comfortable. Just to point out, for this particular chapter, you have two new objects that you're going to create and use, and that's a combo box and a splash screen. Basically, a splash screen is a screen that's going to pop up once your program executed. It's going to be maybe a brief 5 seconds. You actually set the time of how long you want it to appear, but it basically is exactly how it sounds. It's going to splash across the screen, and then your form will load for the user to use it. A combo box is just basically going to be a box that allows you to have more than one selection inside of it. So before I move into the procedures, let's just look at the form. And you'll notice here, we have a combo box here. Notice that there's a drop-down box. And over here in the properties section, you'll notice in the name is CBO. So the acronym that goes in front of a combo box is CBO, okay? So you have a combo box and it is going to have several different options. So I'm gonna run this real quick just so you can see what it does. So that's our splash screen here. It goes about 5 seconds and then it disappears, and now our form loads. This is your combo box that has 3 different selections here. And now you're allowed to make a selection. So let's select Paris. Depending on what you select, that's what will appear. And you have to write the code as to what you want to appear when the user either selects Singapore or they select Paris. You want to make sure you have in there what will appear. And so now you have a text box here where you can enter how many people are going to be on your team. And then here now you can go about selecting what type of game, which game they want to play. And then find out how much it's going to cost. So you'll click find team cost, and it tells you the game you selected, how much you're gonna have to pay for 3 people on the team, and how long the game lasts, which is an hour, okay? Then we clear the form, and it allows us to do the exact same thing over again. So this time, let's select Dallas. You'll notice when I click Dallas, there are 3 different selections here. So notice how you're gonna write the program to present certain information depending on what the user selected. So this time it has 3 different games that the user can play. You enter how many people you want to play, and then the game that you want to play, find team cost, and it does the same thing. What's the name of the game you're selected, how much it's gonna cost, and how long the game lasts, okay? And I'm gonna clear that out and close it, okay? So that's a general idea of what we're creating with this particular program. So we're gonna go back to here inside of our slides so that we can kind of flow through it. So, and when you're writing programs, whether you're using Visual Basic or Java or C++, you're gonna create different tasks that you want to be performed, but you're gonna break them into parts. In Visual Basic, these different parts, these different components are called procedures. In Java, it's called methods, all right? In C++, they're called functions, but they pretty much serve the same purpose, okay? So in Visual Basic, we can create several different procedures that we want. You can create yours from scratch if you want to, from the ground up, or you can double click on your objects and it'll basically go ahead and create your header and your in sub for you. But for this particular chapter, we're going more in depth where you're going to create your own sub procedures. Now, there are two types: sub procedure, function procedure. Sub procedure is just basically passing information or just clicking, just performing a different task. A function procedure returns a value. So sub procedure doesn't return anything, and a function procedure will return a value. So just think about wanting access to a particular value that the procedure holds, and you would return that value. And I'm going to walk you through a better example so you'll have a better understanding. But the key thing is to now understand how your procedures work. So this here is a sub procedure, and this is the syntax of creating it. Private sub and the name of the procedure, whatever you want to call it, open and close parentheses. All right. And then in sub. So everything on the inside is basically the task that will take place once that procedure is called. If you recall, so far you've used close procedure. You have used, I think we've used clear. It just depends on if it has parentheses or not. We've used toString and it passes an argument, toDecimal. All of those are procedures, okay? But a couple of them are sub procedure and some are function procedures, and we'll get into that a little bit more. Now, here, let's kind of pass through this so that you can just see a general idea. All right, this here is a sub procedure here that you're creating. So notice here, button days of week, button means that's a button. So this was automatically generated for you, and then you write the code on the inside as to what you want to happen when that button is clicked, okay? And then it ends that, and then now you have your very own procedure that you've created. Private sub weekday is the name of the procedure. And notice that it's passing parameters, all right? You're passing arguments. You can pass information to a procedure. What that means is I'm gonna send this procedure some information that I want it to process. In this case, you're gonna send it an integer value that's going to be stored inside an int day, right? And once it's passed, it's only going to be used inside of this particular procedure, okay? So that means int day only exists here inside of this procedure, all right? Now, let's back up a little bit. So when the button is clicked, when it clicks the button, here we have a variable here that we've declared. And inside of that variable, we're gonna take whatever's in the text box, whatever the user put in the text box, right? Because text day, text is for a text box, dot text is basically grabbing whatever's in that text box, right? And because it is a string, we're passing it so we can convert it to an integer value. The 2int32 is gonna convert it. Once it's converted, is now stored into int numeric day of week. So whatever value was entered into the text box has now been converted and it's been stored, all right? And then the next thing we do is call our weekday procedure that we created here. Now, notice the difference. This time it's passing a parameter. Sometimes you can have an empty set of parentheses, like for example, like the close procedure that closes your program when you have it written in your exit button or wherever you place it. those parentheses are empty, so it's not expecting any information. However, with this weekday, you have set it up to receive a value, all right? So whenever you have declared that it's gonna receive a value, you have to send it a value, and it has to be of the correct type. So we're sending it int numeric, a day of week, which is the value we retrieved from the text box, and we're passing it. So now, say for example, we entered 7, or let's say 3, we entered 3, right? So weekday is passing 3, what the user entered. So now this particular procedure is being called. So it called weekday procedure, and now we're coming here to use that value 3, all right? So if the value equals 1 or equals 7, right? Then we're gonna present this week, we're gonna present this text on the label weekend, all right? But the value that we said we passed is the number 3. So it doesn't meet either of these, all right? Doesn't meet either of these. So now this if statement does not execute, it does not perform this task. So now it moves to the next if statement. If int day is greater than or equal to 2, and less than or equal to 6, then we're gonna print weekday. The value is 3, so that means it falls between 2 and 6. So this will execute and it'll print weekday. All right, it prints weekday on the label as far as this label. Now we're at the end of this procedure, and it returns to where it was invoked to continue reading the remaining code. Okay, and then it performs this task. A message box appears. Have a great week. Goodbye. All right. That's passing arguments. All right. So what you want to think about is the scope of your variables. Okay, where our variables exist. Int numeric day of week only exists inside of this procedure. It begins here and it ends here. All right. But I want to give weekday access. All right. So now in order for me to give it access, I need to pass it. So that's why I've set up weekday to pass that value. So now the value 3 that is stored in int numeric day of week has been passed. The value has been passed. And now 3 is now stored inside of int day, where int day only exists inside of this procedure, and it performs a task, all right? So remembering the scope of your variables, that is very important, okay? All right, so you can pass by val. So that we were passing by val, so notice that it says by val. That means we're just passing the value, whatever the value is. We're not making any changes to the original value. We're just using whatever number the user entered. That's what we're using. That's what it is. It cannot be changed, okay? That's passing by val, all right? All right, so let's continue. One other thing you can do is pass by reference. When you pass by reference, you're basically referencing the location of the original location of that particular variable. So now you can change the original value when it's passed, okay? So let's look at this one. This one is passing by reference, all right? That means we can change the original value, all right? So here we have button display, which is a button that's going to be clicked. And then we have display message, which is a procedure we have created that's passing by reference, all right? So let's follow the steps as what's happening. So string favorite artist, we've stored Vincent van Gogh there, all right? Then we have a message box that's gonna appear. Favorite artist is Vincent van Gogh, so whatever is there, all right? That's the first message that's gonna print, all right? Now, we call display message, which is our procedure here. This is still a sub procedure. It's not returning anything. And we're passing whatever's stored inside of favorite artist, all right? Van Gogh, Vincent van Gogh. So now we're passing it, right? So we're passing it, and that name is now here, all right? So Vincent van Gogh has now been passed to our display message, right? All right, so now what you're gonna do is continue the statements inside of this procedure. So now a message box appears, says show artist. So it's the second message here. It's gonna print Vincent van Gogh. All right. Now, when I update string show artist, now I wanna update it to Paul Cézanne. All right. So now it's changing that value. All right. So originally when I passed it, Vincent van Gogh was there, but now, and it printed it, but now this next statement is modifying it, is changing it. So now the show artist is going to become Paul Cézanne, and then it's going to print. All right. Now, once it's at the end and this message box appears, is at the end, it goes back to where the procedure was called, where it was invoked, and it finishes the remaining statements. So now favorite artist will print, and it's going to print Paul Cézanne because we pass by reference, which means we're referencing the location. So whatever changes are being made will be made here will also be made to where it was invoked, where it was sent, where it was created. Okay. So now the favorite artist, the fourth message that will print will be the last thing that was stored there, which was Paul Cézanne. That's the difference between pass by reference and pass by value. Pass by value does not change the original value. However, pass by reference does. Okay. You can also pass multiple values if you want to. You don't have to just pass one. So you could easily put a comma here. I'm pretty sure I have an example probably later, but you can pass more than one argument. You can pass by reference, you can pass by value. It doesn't matter. Just depends on how you're wanting to use that information. If you want to change the original value or if you don't, okay? Now, the second thing is function procedure. Function procedure returns a value. So that means the syntax for a function procedure, private, notice that it changes to function because it's a function procedure. The name of it, right? The open and close parentheses. Now, what else is different? As data type. So you have to include this in the header, indicating what type of data are you returning. If you're returning a string, you will put string. If you're returning an integer, you will put integer. So you have to tell it what type of value it will return. All right. What you also have to do is write a return statement as the last statement inside of that procedure, telling it what you want to return. Like, this is the value that I want to return. And whatever value that you return, it has to match the data type that you have indicated that it will return. Okay. All right, let's look at an example here. This is just talking about everything I've just indicated to you. So, oh, and it only returns a single value. You cannot return multiple values. All right, you only return one value at a time. All right, so now we have a function procedure. So we have a button here, compute, click. So you're clicking a button, what you want to happen. And then you have this function procedure that you've created. Don't let this throw you off. You can write it without the access specifier, but if you want to get in the habit, you can put private in front of it if you want, okay? But just being careful as we're moving into more classes, you want to make sure the information is accessible, okay? All right, so let's notice this function procedure is passing multiple parameters. It's passing 2 parameters, pass by val, decimal mouse, as decimal. And notice when you're passing multiple values, you have to have the syntax with it for however many you have. So by val, the name of it, and the type as decimal. And then the second value you're gonna pass, the pass by val, the name of the variable that's gonna hold it as decimal, which is the type, all right? And then the function procedure also includes as decimal. Remember, that's on the outside of your parentheses. You can either have empty parentheses or you can have parentheses that are passing arguments. This one is passing an argument or two arguments. And then as decimal indicates the type of value that you're going to return, all right? And then here we have our return statement that's going to return whatever that value is. All right, so let's back up and walk through this. Here we go. So we have, when we click the button, we have three different variables: decimal miles, decimal gallons, decimal miles per gallon. All right. So notice that we're going to have two different text boxes. We have a miles text box, and we're going to grab whatever's there, whatever the user entered, however many miles they're traveling, and we're converting it to a decimal, and we're storing it inside of decimal miles. All right. So if they enter 10 miles, it'll be converted to 10.0 miles and stored inside of decimal miles. And then decimal text gallons, how many gallons of gas that it took, right? Let's say 5 gallons. So this will take whatever the user entered in that text box, convert it to a decimal, which will be 5.0 gallons. And we're gonna store it in decimal gallons, all right? So now what we're gonna do, notice what changes. Compute gas mileage is our function procedure here that is passing those two values that the user entered. The user entered 10, so we have 10.0 miles. They entered 5, and we have 5.0 miles. All right, so we're passing 10.0, 5.0. All right, so when we call this procedure, we're passing those values. So now 10.0 is being passed here, and 5.0 is being passed here. You can use the same name because inside of this procedure, decimal miles and decimal gallons, there is existence and here. So it's only within the scope of this procedure. And then now for your compute gas mileage, you can also use decimal miles and decimal gallons because now its existence began here and ends here. All right, that's why you can use that. But as those values are passed, now I want to use them to calculate the mileage. So I have a variable here that I've created, mileage, and now I'm calculating. So I'm dividing decimal miles by 5.0. So 10.0 divided by 5.0. And then my end result will be stored into decimal mileage, all right, which will basically be 2.0, right? And once it's stored inside a decimal mileage, now I'm telling it that calculated value that I have, I'm ready to return it. So now it returns that value back to where compute gas mileage was invoked, where it was called. Because this particular procedure call is returning a value, we need to store that value somewhere so we can use it. So the 2.0 that was returned is now stored inside of miles per gallon, all right? That's why you see miles per gallon here set up to hold a value, because compute gas mileage is a function procedure that returns something. So now whatever you return or whatever that procedure returns, I want it stored inside of this particular variable, all right? Once it's sent back, now it finishes the remaining statements inside of this procedure message box. You are getting 2.0 miles per gallon. All right, because remember 2.0 was the return balance. And if my math is off, that's fine. Just make sure you're understanding the process of how the procedures are passing and returning. All right, so once it's returned, it prints that value because now decimal miles per gallon holds that value that was returned. So that's the difference between a sub procedure and a function procedure. A sub procedure does not return anything, a function procedure does, okay? Also, so far, we have been creating constant variables, but what if you just wanted to create a class level variable? This would be the syntax for creating a class level variable. So notice that you have your public class and then you are creating the variables. Remember, class level variables can be used anywhere inside of your program, all right? And this is the syntax: private, and then an underscore, and then the acronym of the type, int, and then the name of it and whatever you want to store. And this is a string one, underscore str, because it's going to be a string, the name of it, and whatever you want to store. Okay. Something that you're going to be using in this particular chapter is try catch. I don't know if you encountered any exceptions as you've been executing your programs, but sometimes you can kind of set up your program to catch certain exceptions that may occur and go ahead and address them and take the necessary action to fix them. So what you would do is try a block of code. This is you trying a block of code and then catching whatever exception may occur. So let's look at this. So now you're trying this code here, you're gonna divide, right? And say, for example, there's a 0, you can't divide by 0, so it'll catch that exception and give you this message box. You're telling it you're attempting to divide by 0, which you can't do. So your try will hold the code that you want to attempt, and then the catch will be set up to catch whatever exception could occur. You can have several different catch. It just depends on what you're looking for, all right? So these are the different ones. Argument null exception. Basically, if you encounter this exception, that means there's no value that has been passed, all right? So that means it's missing a value. There is no argument, all right? Divide by 0 exception, which you just saw, you're attempting to divide by 0. You can't do that. Format exception, you're attempting, and you probably encountered this one when you've been trying to convert your data from your text box to an integer or a decimal. So if you attempt to convert to a type that's not possible, that will be the format exception, all right? No reference exception, just basically when you're passing something or you're calling, whatever the case may be, but it can't happen because either something is empty or is not possible. Overflow exception, when you're trying to store a value inside of a particular type that is too small, okay? System exception is just, it catches all exceptions. It's just all whatever generic exceptions that there could be. So notice here, you try a block of code here. We're taking what's in the text box, we're converting it to an integer, we're storing it in team size. And then now we're checking to see if team size is greater than or equal to 2. So we're checking to make sure that it's between 2 and 6. And then if it is, it's valid, it's fine, okay? However, on the other hand, if it's not, then you have an else statement that's going to start over, but it's also going to catch format exception, which we talked about. You're trying to use a data type or convert to a data type that it does not match. Overflow, the value you're trying to store is too small, or any other system exception. So you can have it catch it. This will help with your program as far as ensuring that it does not halt your program or give errors. It will allow your program to continue. Okay. So for the chapter that you're going, the guided portion, this is the mystery escape application. Notice that here are your class level variables, which will be accessible throughout your entire program, all right? You'll notice that we're using cases, so that means based on what the user selects in the combo box, int city choice, this is going to be whatever the user selected. Did they select Dallas or the Paris or the Singapore? Based on their selection, this is what will be stored. Now, when you think about your combo box, so let's go back to the combo box here. You'll notice here with the combo box, You'll notice it with the combo box, if we come over here, you'll notice that the collection is, they have Dallas pairs. You can have how many items you want. So each of them are placed in an index. This is 0, this is 1, this is 2. All right. So if the user selected Dallas, then that would be index 0. All right. If they selected Singapore, that would be index 2. Just depends on where they're placed. All right. Now, based on that index, that's what will be stored here. If they selected Dallas, it'll be 0. So that will be their choice. If they selected Singapore, then their choice would be 2. That's how you're being able to use the select case. So the case is based on what number they entered. So if they selected Dallas, which is 0, then you're calling your Dallas team procedure. That's why when I executed the program earlier, you could see how there were different types or different information that was appearing depending on what was selected. So if they selected 0, which was Dallas, Dallas team procedure is called. If they selected 1, which was Paris, the Paris team procedure will call, and etc. Now, notice these are procedures because you have the name and you have open and close parentheses. These are sub procedures, which means they are not returning anything. So here you have your procedure, you're calling it. So let's go down to Dallas. So Dallas, when you're calling that procedure, you're filling the name of the games that they can play. You'll notice when we executed the program, they each had different types of games that could be played. So based on Dallas, if they selected Dallas, this procedure will fill the list box with those games. Or if they selected Paris, it'll fill it with these 2 games. Or if they selected Singapore, it will fill it with these 3. Okay. And then your find cost is basically calculating the cost of whatever they would have to pay. Now, these here are function procedures: validate number in team, validate game selection. So validate a number in team is a procedure that is a function procedure that does not pass any parameters, but it does return a value. So let's scroll down here, and validate in team, it doesn't pass any arguments, but it does return a Boolean type. All right. So now it's processing, it's just validating, making sure what the user entered into the text box is an appropriate value. If it is appropriate, it returns true, which means yes, it's good. All right. On the other hand, if it's not valid, it will return false. All right, which is already what it's been stored as. Notice it begins as false, but it changes that value if it is actually valid. All right, so we're beginning it with false, but this value is updated based on the validity. If it is valid, it returns true, and it changes that value to true. If it's not valid, it just remains as false. All right, so this is a function procedure that does not pass anything. However, validate game selection does in fact pass arguments. It passed the Boolean game is selected, which is basically validating whatever the user entered, making sure that what they entered is fine, and it's a Boolean type, and then the string, selected team, whatever selection that they made. All right, so let's go down to int game. I think I passed it. I mean, not int game. It's not called int game. It's called validate game selection. I'm sorry. All right, so validate game selection is the function procedure here, and it passed by reference. Notice that it's passing by reference, which means I can change the original value. It's going to allow me to change the original value. Pass by reference, same thing. It's allowing me to change the original value. All right. So now here we're checking to see what the user selected in the text box, making sure that they made a selection. All right. So whatever they selected in the text box, the list box, now you're converting it to an integer. So let's go back here. So here, this depends on when the program is, let's run it so you can make sure you see what's happening. So when the program is executed and the user makes their selection as far as the city, let's say Paris, and they put a value here, whatever they selected. So this would be 0, this would be 1. All right, in the list box, they selected 0 or they selected 1. All right, and then it gives us our cost. So that's what's happening in the code that we were looking at. So depending on whatever they select, so whatever the selected index is, 0 or 1, is stored inside of this variable. And now we're taking whatever they selected in that text box and we're making it a string. So selected item, whatever they selected, whatever that the name of that game is, we're converting it or to a string, and then we're storing it inside of this string game. That's why you're able to print as a label the game that they selected. All right. And then Boolean, we changed that Boolean game validation to true. Like it is valid. We tried it and it's okay and it's valid, and then it's done. All right. However, if it's not valid, it skips over this portion and it goes to the catch and catches whatever the error is. And Boolean game is set to false, saying that it's not valid. It hasn't been validated, or they haven't made a valid selection. And then it returns the type, which is whatever it is that they selected in this case. All right. But notice that it'll give you an error if it's not the correct one. And so we come back, that value is returned, it's stored into game choice, and now we're using it throughout our program. We're checking now to make sure that they have entered an appropriate number of in the team, that's valid, and we're making sure that they have selected a game. If both are valid, then it moves into performing our task to calculate how much it'll cost and what they will be able to play. Now, based on their choice, whether they selected Dallas, Paris, or Singapore will determine what they will pay. So if they selected Dallas, this is what they'll have to pay. If they selected Paris, this is what they'll have to pay, and so forth. So let's just look at one of them. They're pretty much the same. So Dallas find cost, the only thing that changes is the cost of what they'll be paying, what cost of the game. All right, so they have their cost here for Dallas, they have this cost here for Paris games, and they have this for Singapore. That's why you're using different procedures for each of the cities, because they all have different prices and different game lengths and all of that is different. So you wouldn't want to try to do all the same thing in one procedure when they're different. So you would want to separate them into components. So when you're finding the cost for Dallas, you have this as their cost based on their selection. Now you're gonna basically update the team cost. They selected this game, so this is what they're gonna play. They selected the first one, so, and then this is how much the time is. It just depends on what you selected, okay? So just seeing how all this information is being processed. So from up here where you're calling your Dallas, and notice it's a function procedure as well, that's passing by val, the game that they're playing, whatever the selection they have made, and then by val, whatever, how many teams, how many people are on the team, and by reference, how much time it's going to take. And notice whenever you're using by reference, that means you're changing the original value. By val, you're just using whatever value is stored and you're continuing. So each of those find costs for each one is performing the same set of tasks. It's just depending on how many games are available and the cost, okay? Now that I believe you should be able to run through and look through it right on your own at this point, but just understanding the passing and the returning, okay? So hopefully that was a good overview and it helped you understand what you have read in chapter 7. So good luck with completing the guided portion. If you have questions, let me know. Otherwise, I know you guys are going to do great. All right. I'll see you all soon.